Why do people flock to art fairs, those shopping centres of high culture? Perhaps to throw themselves into the alluring spectacle of art meeting money.
Contemporary art is increasingly becoming something that the masses are attracted to and intrigued about and feel more comfortable in being part of. So our particular fair, we want to introduce new audiences to art, introduce new collectors, possible new collectors to the galleries, and obviously attract existing, very experienced, confident and well-known collectors.
Hey Michael, can I bring you back?
One of the best living British artists.
Very intuitive artist. He started his sculpture with bread.
Is that hair?
Yeah, it's just
That
like
real hair?
from old furniture and things.
Oh, right,
you know?
yeah. Like
Yeah.
a horsehair and stuff like
Yeah,
that. It's
yeah,
beautiful. I love that.
yeah.
That's nice. I'm about to give birth. I'm a queen child.
Well, the problem with the art fair is this, that people come here and they pay £20 or so to get in, just as they would for a major exhibition in a major museum. But what you're seeing, of course, is not an exhibition. It doesn't have any kind of cogent vision behind it. It's a very uncomfortable, crowded and difficult space in which to view art properly. In these little booths you thread from gallery to gallery, from shop to shop, essentially, in what is a gigantic mall. Perhaps there's nothing wrong with that. Certainly not if you think that art is merely another commodity. There's nothing special about it at all. That it's just another thing that is bought and sold. But then that makes it strange that people pay such a hefty fee to get in here. You wouldn't do it to get into any other shopping centre, after all.
Galleries evolve, the art market evolves, and we see this and we have to adapt what we do. By and large, we're finding that a lot of our collectors would prefer to come and see us at a venue like this, where they can come and see what we do well, but they can also compare and contrast and go for a walk around a big hall and see beautiful things at different stands. And that is perhaps more so now than it's ever been before.
In the past, there were relatively few collectors, and they were quite a well-defined bunch of people. They knew a lot about art history and its traditions. They were able to think their way into abstruse forms of avant-garde art. So it wasn't just a case of being rich, it was a case of being someone rich with a distinct culture, and they were almost all from either North America or from Western Europe. And the dealers knew who these people were. They knew who would be prepared to spend serious amounts of money on a regular basis on buying contemporary art. So the gallery was not like a normal shop. If they were displaying, say, an important work by Gerhard Richter back in the 1980s, and it was going to cost you £500,000, you could walk into the gallery waving your checkbook and being good for the money. But the question would not, the response would not be, here you are, but who are you? What else is in your collection? Are you ready for this piece? Artists and dealers tended to stick together for quite a long time. Dealers would have distinct stables of artists, and collectors perhaps would be collecting in this same area and would stick with those dealers. So it was more like a relationship of patronage involving exchanges of money than a free market.
You went to Venice or somewhere in Italy and you saw these prints.
Certainly in a fair such as ours, there is the need for contemporary artists to embark upon a sort of a journey with both existing and potential collectors of the work. And I think this sort of sense and approach, which is about, well, if you don't know who the artist is and you don't know what the value of the work is already, quite frankly, you don't deserve to own it. I mean, that is sort of a character and it's not something that sits within this fair. I think we have very, very serious museum quality work being exhibited here. We've got works that's, hundreds of thousands of pounds, but our fair seeks to create an environment which is supportive to the work and supportive to the collector at whatever level.
I'm kind of with you on this. I'd much rather people came to my gallery and sat with me and my colleague and talked in great depth about new discoveries by artists who we represent and the latest new thing in modern British or whatever it happens to be. But actually these days people seem to be busier. They want that hit. They want to be able to walk down an aisle and look to their left and look to their right and get a hit from this gallery and a hit from that gallery and make up their minds in a shorter time, get the information perhaps on their phones or their iPads, come to a conclusion whether this is for their collection or not, and then move on. We'd much rather they as it were, dug vertically down into what they were doing, but a lot of people just prefer to work across.
The market has become more conventional in a sense. It's more like a free market than it was, and there are various reasons for that. It used to be that if you collected art, it would cost you money, essentially. Even if the works that you collected increased in value, it still cost a lot to insure them, to preserve them, to store them, to guard them. And if you wanted to sell them, there would be other costs involved in that. So there was a cost that came from owning contemporary art, and part of the kudos of owning contemporary art was bound up with that cost. Well now, especially since the financial crisis certainly, it was rather difficult to find stocks and shares in which to put your money which are going to give you good returns. So now art is quite a good bet. So we have many, many new investors, some of whom are really not very invested in the qualities of art, the traditions of art, in knowledge about art. What they want to know is, what will this be worth in a year's time?
I deal with collectors and I love collectors, but now that people collect for different reasons, whereas people would collect an artist in depth, people would collect because of the sheer love of it. Now there is that money that goes with it. And I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm aware of that. The well-informed collector is kind of giving away to the person buying to give them social eloquence.
New buyers have come in from all around the world, so it's become a strange mark of one's status as a member of the cosmopolitan super rich that you buy this stuff, okay? Even if you don't understand it or have any particular connection with it. So both from the side of investment and from the side of conspicuous consumption, it's a much larger, much more globalized affair.
You will now look at the Global Art Fair calendar, and pretty much if you have the means and the transport, you can visit a different fair in a different country every month, if not, every fortnight.
For example, I'm just back from Palm Beach. 2 days ago, I was in the fair at Palm Beach. Now I'm here in Islington. It's slightly bizarre. You would have thought that the people we saw, international travellers, people who come to London, New York, Paris, do the trips every year, would have a broader view of what they like and what they don't like. Not necessarily so. They home in on a particular artist here, they home on a different artist there. And sadly, a lot of what we do, a lot of our modern British at the middle end, doesn't really travel. And it always saddens us that some of these major paintings that you see, not just our gallery, but all around this fair, you will see important British paintings, and the dealers will know that they have very little chance of taking these beyond these shores.
There's a way which behind the decorum of the art fair, there's a Darwinian struggle for attention. So there's lots of works calling out for you to look at them. Much of it very garish and shouty work.
There's a certain kind of art, particularly in the contemporary field, which is creeping in, not particularly expensive, quite bright, quite quick fix, and there are plenty of collectors who are drawn towards that kind of thing, and we see it at the art fairs, and that's the way of the world.
This is a very new piece by David Cottrell. It seems to be rather obvious, but we're looking, at the American wall. You start looking more closely, and you might have Trump-like figures too. So looking at all this in a very sort of amusing scenario, putting everything on a ping-pong table like a game.
One of the things that I find striking about a lot of contemporary art and the way that it's been moving over the past few years is it's become a lot more accessible. But this is quite a readable work in a sense, and rather an entertaining one in some ways. And do you see the same thing
Yes.
moving through?
Yeah, occasionally, and I think probably because the art world also has gone very big,
Yes.
big money, and giant markets. So I think also the first response to that is to make something immediate, so that people get whatever seduced or think they understand something. But some artists work like that anyway. Some others are adapting to what they think is needed or would make their work work.
The very environment of the art fair itself starts to determine the kind of work that is produced. So for one thing, artists work to a different rhythm. Whereas in the old days, if you had a gallerist, maybe you only had one gallerist, that's one thing, perhaps probably in the town where you lived, they might demand an exhibition from you annually. So your rhythm of work would be to produce a body of work which could command the walls every year or so. Well, now gallerists are obliged to attend many art fairs, and their rhythm of production is month by month or even every couple of weeks. And they want fresh things to hang on the booths, right, each time. So the rhythm of production for the artists is sped up. It's like many other things, other forms of business under this accelerated form of capitalism in which we live. So artists are no exception in that sense. So they have less time to reflect and to do new things. And there's more pressure on them to churn out versions of successful things that they've done before. Deborah Azzopardi's story is a very interesting one, I think, because she comes to the attention of the art world because one of her pieces is picked up by IKEA and is reproduced over and over again and sold through their stores. She spoke to us for a little while and told us that when she was house hunting, half the houses she went into had her work hanging up inside them. Now again, this would have been the kiss of death, one would have thought, for a serious artist wanting to sell works in the art market. But far from it these days. The IKEA stamp of approval seems to mean that her original paintings can command quite a high market price, into the tens of thousands of pounds. And this tells you, I think, that something deep has shifted in the art world to do with the character of collectors, the character of dealers, the character of the way in which commodities circulate in the art world.
There's Angela.